Gonzalo. I was just texting with Michael. He's going to try to join, but he had a family thing that was quite unexpected, so might not be able to. But let me, I guess, go Charter Cities Institute. Right. So the idea is new cities with better laws. The kind of lots of historical examples. Most recently, Shenzhen, Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai. And there's multiple ways to kind of think about why these projects matter. One is kind of what might be described as a traditional economic development view, where parts of the world are still obviously quite impoverished. Oftentimes, the reason they are impoverished is because they have bad laws, kind of defined as laws that make entrepreneurship very difficult, investing, hiring people, all these things just prohibitively expensive. And as a nonprofit, right? What we can do is figure out, okay, how do we bring good laws, better rules into these places that don't have them to accelerate economic development? Kind of another angle for charter cities is creating opportunities on the frontier. And so the U.S. has made innovation in certain areas kind of basically illegal. And so charter cities can, in some circumstances, create kind of space to do experiments, some space to do invent technology to apply technology that might not otherwise be legal, and kind of push the human frontier. And as a nonprofit, what we do is we work with governments, we work with new city developers to figure out how do you actually implement these projects in practice. And I can go into that in more depth later in this conversation. And then, kind of the other hat that I'm wearing is um, for Zanzalu. And there, what we do is it's a pop up in Zanzibar. Many of you might have heard about Zuzalu, right in Montenegro a few years ago. And the idea of Zanzalu is just kind of, can we bring folks together in East Africa to Zanzibar, which is a beautiful tropical destination, for a few weeks, and kind of start building a more permanent community, kind of like the spark of entrepreneurship, of innovation in a particular context.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful context. Hugo.
Yeah, super cool, Mark. I've been following some of the work. I was also chatting quite a lot with Brad for that Alpha City. I was also doing some interesting projects over Africa. On our end, on the New Economy Institute side, we don't have as many boots on the ground or practical projects in this area yet, but it's one of the major aspirations for this new cycle, because again, as mentioned, we started in a very pragmatical way as a community effort of the wide crypto ecosystem that popped up in Portugal during COVID, and even a little bit before that, but mostly around the pandemic and the lockdown. And all those people came to Portugal and they were like, "Oh, damn, we are here, we like it, but we are afraid of what may happen very soon when society gets back to normal, and we want to make sure that we can enact change that makes this a conducive environment for us to be building high tech software organizations and businesses, and be able to do that from Portugal and contribute to the local economy, and therefore make it a win-win for everyone." So in a certain sense, it's very much like the Charter Cities Institute mission. Overall, the goal is to make sure that better laws are enacted and that we bring innovation and development towards wherever we want to live. But it was born with that very pragmatic sense. And now the goal is to expand on that, expand on our learnings, and leverage our learnings, and be able to make sure that the network state movement is just not about communities, and of course pop-up experiments are great and very important, but that we move forward towards cities and eventually towards smaller states. And we have had some conversations in some regions of Portugal. I've lived in Hong Kong before as well. I have many friends in Shenzhen, used to go there a lot, and that has been an inspiration as an economic student as well, on how can we make a true special economic zone, digital first, like most likely, closer to where we are, or that we also contribute to those that are trying to attract talent elsewhere. So that's pretty much the gist of it, and the scope of what we're involved right now.
Nice. Yeah, I think this conversation could get a little juicy, because I can see where there's going to be points here that we may not all agree, but that's going to be, but it's fine, because this is all toward the greater good of helping build and create a new society, regardless of the particular trajectory that we take, because you guys are extremely valuable still in the movement. Okay, cool. But let's get a little bit more context before we figure out where the differences are. Let's also figure out where a lot of the alignment in as well. So let's talk about the changing world that we're embedded in right now, because it seems, Hugo, you guys are interested in parallel societies, network states, whatever kind of terminology we want to use for these new emergent societies. But you're also very interested in Portugal. You're interested in localism, local communities, making sure that human capital comes back into those spaces as well. Mark, you guys, of course, focused on charter cities, but you also do the pop up in Africa, right? Or the charter city in Africa. So let's talk about how the world is actually changing. Can you guys explain for the audience uh, why this is happening, why there's so many of these so-called network states, pop-up societies? We've touched on it a little bit, but we really want to try to break this down and make it really memorable for people and palatable. Why is this happening? And what are the catalysts? What are the drivers? And then we can maybe get into and touch on what the future looks like, because it's this context that we operate in. So let's try to understand it.
Sure. So I guess to me, the key thing is, right, like if we are looking at the phenomena as one, kind of very succinctly defining what the phenomena is, and then two, defining kind of who it's happening to. And so if I think about charter cities, for example, right, like why are they happening? I'd probably summarize it in two ways. One, in parts of the world, mostly Africa and Asia, you have tremendous urbanization occurring. So you've got millions, tens of millions of new urban residents every year. And many countries in these regions don't have the capacity to provide infrastructure, right? Like roads, sewers, electricity, water, et cetera, effectively for these new urban residents. So you basically have this very large demand for services that's currently not being met, that creates a frame for alternatives. If you think about the other kind of charter cities frame, more kind of pushing the frontier, right? There, the demand is coming from a lack of state capacity. So there's lots of examples, but right, kind of one example, the United States, we built the Golden Gate Bridge in, like, I don't know, 3 years or something. Right. Today it would take us 10 years to build a bridge like that, even if we ever finished. Right. We sent a man to the moon 50 years ago. Today we probably couldn't repeat that feat, because or just much more bureaucratic, much more risk averse, et cetera. So there's this demand for a new frontier, for better institutions, for better governance, that I think is pushing some of these things that might be more attractive to kind of people in the audience, and people with more opportunities. And then I think for the pop-ups, right, with Zanzalu, what we're looking for, what we see is that there's a demand for community. There's a demand for these experiences that not everyone has access to, and that's as well as just kind of increased ability for a lot of people to travel. That makes these pop ups a lot more viable than they used to be.
Yeah, definitely. To build on that, no disagreement so far is, I think, the fact that, like, never before in history have we been so mobile. It's so easy for you to relocate, even with a family, especially without. And before, states and even cities, they didn't have like a literal monopoly, but they had like de facto enforcing power just because there was so much friction associated with the act of rebelling and moving away because you weren't content with the way your society was being governed, that now people have two options. Will I fight the system and try to fight it from within because there are honestly very not many other alternatives, or will I just leave and go into this market for societies, this market for other nation states and regions to live in, and go into one that's aligned more with my values? And what we're seeing is that people naturally choose what's easier, and due to this reduced friction, then people just go and explore. And it's very easy for people to then go out and create new communities. Even though, of course, now with all the digital um, flop and on all the flood of digital relationships we have, sometimes we see an ear from people all around the world that not as easy as they're expected to create local in real person relationships, and that's something that people crave for. But it's all up to what each person is um, willing to go out and expose themselves and contribute towards those communities so that they can receive back as well. And so yeah, with this context, now this really interesting situation is happening. This unless a state forces global taxation on their citizens, as some nation states like the US do, then it's very easy for people to go and go into this market and choose whatever makes sense for them. And then the second derivative of this is that this is where parallel societies can really find an interesting space to emerge. And perhaps because it's so difficult to actually create a pure network state or even a pragmatical network state, then I believe that parallel societies can emerge as the most practical solution to this problem of desire for citizenship that's more aligned with their values, and to be able to contribute to that while still living, of course, in a physical space that respects the individual. But even if not, then sovereign individuals may be able to, yeah, escape the conundrums of physical existence in some places in the world. And so I think that's kind of, yeah, where we are right now. And then all the uncertainty around this is what's next. Will governments rebel? Um, will we be able to carve out some spaces for some corners of the world to allow these network states to exist, or will we indeed only have parallel societies as the only real alternative for people to try to thrive in this chaotic world?
Yeah, now this is a point that I'm going to agree with both of you guys on too. This is a great summation and original consideration of where we're at. I'm going to add a few bit of thoughts from the logo side and just from my personal observation. So, one thing that we for sure have noticed, there's been a growing trend. It just in the last several decades, ramping up, of course, over time in digital nomads, people wanting to do more exploring, an experience of being a vagabond and a wanderer. And this was only heightened and intensified by the COVID-19 pandemic. You guys are probably familiar with the so-called Great Resignation, where when everybody was told to go home from their jobs during COVID, a lot of people realized that, well, I came home and I'm working from home. Why do I need to go back to an office? So at that point, a lot of people realized they could work from home. They decided to become more remote in their working. So this created a growing trend of digital nomadism. Of course, this is rising around the same time that we have a lot of geopolitical strife all around the world. And as Mark pointed out very eloquently, uh, governance is failing. This is also, of course, something that Jared and Peter have talked about in their book, Farewell to Westphalia. We have massive governance failures all around the world. Trust levels for governments and nation states are at an all-time high, and that doesn't seem to be lowering or will lower anytime soon. So this is why we have this massive exodus or this diaspora of people traveling all around the world wanting to set up shop. This has very clearly also created a need and created a marketplace for special economic zones, for pop-up cities, charter cities, network states, parallel societies. And because some of these digital nomads as well are starting to look for places where they can live, where they can start to reside. So I think this is part of this. Part of what's happening is related definitely to COVID's Great Resignation, but I think this has just been a trend that grows alongside the creation of a new segment of workers, what we can call knowledge workers or just remote professionals. And I think that's part of where we're at in the world. And these guys, Hugo and Mark, both nailed it. No disagreements here. So let's talk about this other aspect of this. There, as a result of this happening, there's more than ever. A lot of these countries, and this is probably not even the full weight of this hasn't even come down on nation states yet. But this idea of human capital flight or brain drain, people are leaving, especially some of the smarter people in our space, right? Engineers, developers, architects of varying stripes. All these folks are leaving to go to more hospitable jurisdictions because of these governance failures. So this is part of this people becoming more mobile and more nomadic, and this has altered the way that they think and they work. How do you guys think that this is going to affect the traditional nation states? Is it going to vastly impact their positioning in the world, their power? Is it changing the dynamics, the state of the game, so to speak? And how does that look like from your vantage point, working at these think tanks and your institutions, and how does that also make you feel? And this is Hugo, when we get to you, thinking about the local communities in Portugal. How does this impact you there? Whoever wants to start's cool.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, I guess, the kind of nation state and trends, migration is definitely one, but I think it's useful to place it in a kind of broader context where, right, like probably late 19th, early 20th century was the peak of the nation state to the extent that uh, governments were like, right, relatively competent. Their people held a strong identity and their nationality were willing to die for it by the millions. And obviously that's kind of very substantially changed. I mean, I think almost every Western country is having substantial challenges with recruiting people to the military, right? Governments are unable to um, uh, uh, sometimes provide the same set of services that they used to. You're seeing this increasing kind of strain of welfare states that are compounded by changing demographic pyramids. And migration is kind of one facet of that. Over the last, right, like few months at least, in my circles, I've seen there appears to be kind of an increase in the acceleration of people out of the United Kingdom because there are more opportunities in Dubai or in the US or in Australia with kind of better salaries, perhaps some higher degree of personal safety. And I think it is right. Like the idea of nationality does not feel nearly as strong as it once did. And it's hard to know exactly what that portends for the future, but it's definitely kind of a substantial change in how things have been approached for the last 50, 150 years.
Yeah, Sterling, can you just kind of rephrase the beginning of the question? I understood like the part of what would be like what's the impact in Portugal and the local communities, but can you just rephrase?
Yeah. So effectively, like the local communities, especially under nation states or like legacy jurisdictions, how is the brain drain, the fact that people are traveling more widely and more broadly and going to more hospitable jurisdictions, how is that impacting your local jurisdictions where your organizations operate? And obviously, in Mark's case, they're part of this, right, with the charter cities piece. But maybe it's a different case for you guys at the New Economy Institute, where you do have some local focus, but you're also interested in network states. So, how do you think about the concept of brain drain and losing uh, strong human capital, right? Like the engineers, developers, professionals. How is that impacting you? How do you think about that?
Definitely.
And is it an issue?
Apologies. I'm taking my cat to the vet right now, so I have to jump off a call. So I very much apologize for not being able to finish, but I'm sure you'll have a good conversation.
Oh, good, Mark. See you
Cool.
around.
Thanks, Mark. No worry.
Yeah, definitely. Like this is key for us. And when we were founded in 2021, our founding manifesto, out of 6 topics, one was specifically about a brain drain and how to reverse the Portuguese brain drain. So historically, Portugal is kind of a backwaters economy in Europe, isolated from the rest of the continent through the Iberian Peninsula and the Spanish blockades. And and this meant that even though we were like a small country historically, roughly 8 to 10 million people over the past few centuries, that meant that there were simply no economic opportunities there, and people were just tired of the famine and the overall state of despair, and so that they went east in this case. And of course, very few people in Portugal like Spain, so people just stopped right after Spain in the beginning. In France, even today in Paris, there's more like than a million Portuguese. And Liechtenstein, a third of the population is Portuguese. In Switzerland, maybe a fifth or a sixth. I don't know exactly, but there's a bunch of Portuguese there. London, the same, although London is more of a new phenomenon. And these days we have also a bunch of people going into Asia, as I did roughly more than roughly 10 years ago. And like for Portugal, this has been politically a problem because people think that it's bad to be subsidizing these young kids education, and then they just jump off to potentially never return. But what we are increasingly seeing is that while the first waves of immigration were indeed ones in which people wouldn't return except for vacationing or to build houses for their children or their grandchildren to enjoy only in the summer, these days we are seeing people that they go abroad to explore economic opportunities early in life, but then they really appreciate that you can come back to Portugal to have a great quality of life. And so, like, it's just a natural state of affairs. And if the rest of society is functioning relatively well, you are protected by that. And then, in addition to this, or to complement this, I think the key ingredient here is that it was not only the fact that you could get good quality of life, but due to the fact that Portugal attracted then this massive population of tech workers, then this made it also really interesting for you if you are working in tech to be able to work from your country and then also have that professional network and all those professional relationships in loco, in real life, not only online through Twitter Spaces or online conferences or whatever. And so this makes it quite vibrant if you're working tech, and maybe you travel a bit for some conference and whatnot. Maybe you have an office, maybe you don't, but then you always have the option at least once a month in the major cities, but typically even once a week, to go into some meetup and find other people, talk with them, and that's good for ideation, for overall innovation. And so this helps people return, or this adds to the equation of, I'm going to go back to Portugal because the weather is great and the people are nice, but then I can also have a fulfilling professional experience. And in this case, that happened because Portugal, by accident, not by design, was able to attract that tech ecosystem. And so for everyone that's out there trying to build either a parallel society or a network state or a charger city or any kind of location driven proto nation, then it's really important that you are focused on attracting talent, because then everything else comes after that.
Yeah, and Hugo, to be fair, I feel like, I've been to Portugal, Lisbon specifically, a number of times, and everyone that I speak to who has set up shop there, who's a nomadic, who is some type of wanderer or remote worker, they tell me that this is a very strong community for people who want to travel and be involved in a community that is very accepting of nomads and wanderers. And so Lisbon, specifically as the city, has attracted a tremendous amount of talent from abroad because the area is more accepting. The jurisdiction is more hospitable. It's one of those hospitable
Mhm.
jurisdictions that people are actually traveling to. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, definitely. And very recently, that started to change because the government was reacting to global forces that affect societies and create problems for their core constituencies. And you can either react better or in a way that's not so good, but it's still the reaction that one can justify. And so in that context, there was a little bit lack of nuance in the way the government responded to these shifting trends in society regarding migration, that made the let's call it like the high value workers community a bit reticent about the ability of the government to continue to be welcoming to them. And then this translates into all sorts of like day-to-day issues that people face. But then when we talk with the people, like in comparison, this is also a staple in many other places in the world. Um, and so there are always trade-offs when you are away from home, and then people have to balance those trade-offs. And if the government wants to succeed in continuing to foster that critical ingredient of the country, then it will have to make some changes, make some accommodations sooner rather than later. But until then, it has been quite lucky, because people like the country despite or in spite of the government. And so that has been um, yeah the stroke of luck that the Portuguese government had for the moment.
Nice. Yeah, so I want to take just a moment to reset the room, and then we'll move on to something that I think will be really interesting for us both to discuss. I want to bring up one of the points where there might be just a little bit of a disagreement, and then we can try to work around that in real time, because I think it's going to be a valuable conversation. But in the meantime, for any of you guys who just joined, we're here with Hugo with the New Economy Institute out of Portugal, also one of our coalition partners for PS. So any of you guys who are coming to PS, you can get to spend some time with Hugo, chat with him, get to understand what they're working on, and just an amazingly intelligent person with a lot of knowledge in terms of what's happening in the parallel society space. We're gonna chat here for about another 10 or so minutes. And then we do want to extend an invitation for any of you guys who are in the audience who might want to have some questions for Hugo or just be involved in this conversation. You can, by all means, you can come up and engage. If not, I'm sure Hugo and I will still have plenty of things to talk about. We'll probably go for roughly another 30 to 40 minutes. So depending on where the conversation goes. Cool. So, Hugo, without further ado, we'll get into this. You had mentioned before that so thinking about network states, thinking about parallel
Mhm.
societies, the ultimate goal, at least in your mind, would maybe be to create a whole new kind of state, and it might end up that we don't have very many disagreements ultimately, but so this is like Balaji's vision, basically, right? That we create a new a new power center, like through crafting a new country that gets to play at the big boys table, that has diplomatic recognition, etc. I just want to see, is that your particular take? And I don't, because I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to understand where you're coming from in terms of like New Economy Institute, and this is a broader question about where this is all ultimately going, and how these parallel societies and new communities are going to pan out. So yeah, hoping to get your take, and then I can share my thoughts as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's a very idealistic vision. It will be nice, definitely, but I'm not sure how far down the line that is. Yeah, even in an optimistic perspective, are we from that becoming a reality? And so that's definitely desirable, but as as the fall of the Farewell to Westphalia book reminds us, like the nation states are so entrenched, their power is so vast that it's not like they will easily cede control of their existing privileges, right? And especially if we're talking about folks just going out and physically contribute to other places other than the ones they are physically residing, or in this case just abdicating from physical space for which currently exists. But I think in that regard, like the approach that the Charter Cities Institute has been having, and some other folks, is quite good in the sense that there's so much physical space out there that's underutilized, and now with fast approaching climate changes, this may mean that like places that were before considered not super hospitable just from a weather perspective, and so many people are moved, rightly so, by the weather in their decisions to choose a new geography to live, then maybe very suddenly those places are going to become very interesting, but they have no infrastructure. And so if people pull together their capital, they'll be able to invest in those places and make new Dubai still, new Singapore's, new Netherlands, whatever. And so I think there's just a lot of known unknowns that exist in that vision of Balaji. And so I remain cautiously optimistic about it. But then what I'm really interested in is, what can we do as soon as possible? Like what are the parallel societies we can create as a backup right now? Because things are also changing so fast across the Western world that, yeah, it's kind of not good to live without a fallback.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, can you can hear me okay, right,
Perfect,
Hugo?
perfect.
My
Yeah.
mic died out. Cool, cool. Yeah. So a few thoughts on this. One of the things with Balaji's vision too, and I think we agree on a lot of the like broader points in terms of the current situation around the world, why this is happening. Also, 100%. I think we're all very clear that governance is current governments and their governance structures and frameworks have utterly failed most people. This is why people are leaving. This is why they're looking for better places. This is why they're exercising exit ideology and exit philosophies. At Logos, generally speaking, we would tend to think, and this is probably makes sense in context, that having this vision of trying to set up a whole new country around a network state, and trying to get diplomatic recognition, that is effectively playing into a system that is already broken and faltering. Now I will say that if there are some communities that can attempt to do this and also remain in a situation where they don't corrupt, then by all means you're welcome to try. But my personal feeling and anticipation is that that's completely unnecessary, because we can develop grassroots communities that have the ability and the capability to create momentum and change without necessarily having to play into a system that is sounding its death knell. So that, but again, that is not to say that I'm saying, oh, don't, what you're doing is wrong, and we're enemies, or we have to be at each other's throat. It's just to say that there are different approaches people can take, and this is one of the approaches we've taken. But I think you did point out, Hugo, very clearly that there are drawbacks and limitations to Balaji's philosophy. But I think one of the key things, and we can discuss this if you want, one of the key things is that vision of wanting to play at the big boys table comes with it a set of psychological baggage, and that psychological baggage is the fact that it gives you the the idea that you can come into a space as like a technocratic overlord almost, and tell everyone kind of how it's going to go, right? With like a startup or a mindset of a ruler king, and tell everyone how it's going to go. And now it looks like you're creating more of the same of what we've already had to deal with, of what people are trying to get away from. I think there's a lot of people who think just because we're in this space and we're like Bitcoin or blockchain millionaires or whatever, that it means that everything's just going to be hunky dory and there's not going to be any kind of problems or fallout as a result of our actions, and we're just going to create this utopia. But I think clearly, and most of us here would agree, that that's not going to be the case, that we're all still humans, that just because we have high technology doesn't mean it changes the dynamics that happen on the ground in these spaces that we move into. And we have to be very open to creating novel governance models and frameworks and figuring out ways to work together with the local populations so that we don't corrupt those areas, that we don't corrupt ourselves, and that we don't become morally bankrupt like these other individuals who have created these systems or these networks. So just a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the point you touched regarding the human nature is very interesting. Back in the day, before crypto, I had a small nootropic startup, and I'm still am quite fond of the transhumanism movement and nootropics and overall like experimenting with stuff to kind of fight the limitations of your nature. But of course, the best way to do that is the pure transcendence, and eventually humans will evolve. So many um, species have existed within the almost branch, and it's just a matter of time until different humans come up. By definition, and maybe they won't survive, maybe they'll just be absorbed, but it could be the case that some superhuman naturally pops up, and that will definitely change the dynamics if we don't kill them straight away. Or else technologically something happens with brain machine interfaces or whatever that allow us to break free completely from these broken cycles that have just been repeated on loop across human history in regard to anything that concerns the governance of the public thing. So one of the things that interests me the most is exactly that. How can we design then a new system that doesn't play with the broken rules of the past? And if we cannot transcend the humans, at least the system can transcend all the past mistakes. And of course, that's again also very naive and optimistic. But that will be the hope for what can be done, and that's one of the key appeals also of blockchain technology, because if we recognize that it's not 100% trustless and there are some other limitations associated with it, it is indeed a better way to at least create this infrastructure layer for then like the basic building blocks of governance. And so that's kind of the state of affairs of like the things that that I keep thinking about. And I hope that this is a very hot topic during parallel society now in March in Lisbon. um, and it's great to have that in Portugal as well, of course. But I'm very much looking forward to all the discussions that folks will have there around this. And yeah, I think it's going to be the perfect forum for that.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the one of the reasons that we get together too, is that so we can come to terms with any kind of uh, disagreements or different, not even disagreements, but different ways, methods, or modalities about going about deploying new kinds of parallel societies or emergent communities. And I think this is where the rubber meets the road, right? and this is all, anything that we talk about here in this space is always going to be at the risk of being too ideological, right? Because we're all working on the front lines of this great transition of the human species that is occurring right now with these communities popping up. So there's always going to be some speculation too that we engage in. But one thing is 100% true, and I think this is what you're getting at as well, Hugo. I think what we are attempting to develop to rectify some of these governance wrongs that have happened historically in the context of the human species is to just allow for more open experimentation of different ways of organizing, and allowing this kind of experimentation to happen. You know, Mark was here, like within the context of charter cities or different types of communities, and also within the context of whole special economic zones, because it will give us more of an understanding of how we can work together without playing zero sum games, right? Without entering into these lose lose dynamics that have ultimately led to the corrupting influences and factors that continuously disturb and undermine our legacy governments, right? So trying to fix that, I think, definitely deserves some experimentation. I think this is another thing, right? There's a lot of people in the world who believe that this is that governance is an unsolvable problem, right? That this is just quote unquote human nature. But I think ultimately any of these systems, the reason that the reason that they fail, the reason that they encourage people to engage in corruption or corrupting dynamics is because of the incentive structures,
Mhm.
right? A
100%.
lot of times we are very much geared to seek out whatever kind of benefit that we can for ourselves and our inner circle. So if we can fix the incentives to ensure that there is some type of collective benefit as a result of our engagement with each other, then we're probably on the right path. I think ultimately behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum when it as it comes to humans, and it's not psychologically generated in the sense that we don't have a choice. We always have a choice about how we set up our systems and our governance experiments, and that is going to inform how we behave and how these systems ultimately roll out over the long term. Just seeing what you think about that.
No, yeah, definitely. And this is another very interesting thing about like the tech space most of us are working in, which is like if we zoom out, perhaps, hopefully, and again also from an optimistic point of view, the most interesting contributions of the crypto communities to society will be a fruit of the fact that it just made governance cool again for the teenagers, at least 5 years ago or so. now, now, now there was all this natural backlash against governance because suddenly government allowed everything else to happen without all the decentralized theater that was also coming up, sadly. But for a long period of time, people were very much concerned with like the natural aspects, the natural incentives associated with coordinating human behavior on the blockchain. And of course, technically, there's still a bunch of that if you're looking from the perspective of securing the blockchains. But then on a project level with the DAOs, that died up a little bit. But still, it infused that bug in a whole new cohort of talented young people. And I think that was cool because then, at least in Europe, it was clear that for the past few decades, young talented folks were mostly, and for very good reasons, totally uninterested in the political scene because they didn't want to be associated with that broken system, and so eventually they fell into I think it was either Plato or Aristotle's trap, the quote that says like the highest penalty for um, not rising up to governing um, your own society is being governed by someone dumber or with worse interests than you. And so that's what's happening, and that's why then society is crumbling, and that's why people are leaving and interested in parallel societies and network states, because for very good reasons, when they were younger, they didn't have the a long-term vision to be involved, and then now it's too late. Does it make sense to get your hands dirty when you are suddenly 30 or 40, and so you need to quickly come up with alternatives? So I think that's where we are, and eventually most of these people will just accommodate and be complacent with the status quo, and that's bad. But we don't need many of us to go out and build something. We just need one person to go out and build something that is adopted by a few others, and that's how change happens. We just need one great man, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely I think understandable that a lot of the people who are visionaries and like trying to set the tone right for where we're going is certainly a handful of people. But by the same token, having many people work on developing this and actually engage in it is another thing. But you're right in terms of like the the technological scale of the laggards versus the early adopters when it comes to any kind of new technology or new society is 100% true. And by the way, guys, I want to mention for you guys in the audience who are enjoying this conversation, if you're sitting there and you have a comment or a thought, it's nagging at you, by all means, you guys are welcome to go ahead and come up on the stage now. We're really glad to have Hugo here with us with the New Economy Institute. We're gonna continue this conversation for another 25 or so minutes. You're welcome to come up and have a conversation with us. In the meantime, we're going to keep heading down this path and trying to. This is actually a really critical conversation because it's really thinking about the future, getting out the crystal ball, and thinking about how these new societies are going to emerge, what they're all going to look like, who's going to be involved. Are we going to continue down this trajectory? There are probably some people too, and it's funny. I haven't. This shows you the bubble and the echo chambers that I sometimes am embedded in. But for sure, as I've been in the just in the crypt thinking about broadening this a little bit, being in the Web3 and the cryptocurrency space for so long, I've had so many people come up and tell me that this technology is just a fad, right? It's not gonna be here for a long time. It's just a small group of people who are interested in it, and so it makes me think about the same thing with parallel societies and these novel communities that are emerging. Is this just a fad, right? This is Hugo was kind of getting at as well too. Is it just a fad? Is it just going to be here? Is it a flash in the pan? Just going to be here for a little bit of time, and then everyone's just going to go back to business as usual with the legacy states. So, yeah, go ahead. It seems like he probably has some thoughts on this as well. I don't think it's a fad. I think it's clear that this is like a actual transition.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree with that. I was curious to know, and of course, with all the disclaimers at the beginning, I understand we're speaking on your behalf, not on the behalf of Logos or the Parallel Society Summit. But I was curious to understand what's your perspective on what will success look like for a parallel society as it's being envisioned by the current community. Because I think that will also be a great way to dismantle the fad criticism. Because, like with the charter cities, that's very clear, and that's a great intermediate step towards a fully fledged network state. The city can become a city state eventually, and just overcome its status as a charter. But then for parallel societies, perhaps it's not so easy for people to envision what success looks like. And if we crystallize that, I think it's easier to then, fight the quick reboot or the quick dismissal of this being just a fad.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I'm glad you asked that. And I can kind of couch this in a more of a Logos perspective because even personally strongly agree with I think how Logos and the community, because and this is why of course we speak for ourselves, because it is a more of a decentralized community, and there's people who have certain views that may conflict with others, and that's just normal human functioning. But this is my thought. So having a movement be developed around these parallel societies that actually have a track record of creating actionable change in the local communities that they're operating in, to me is a huge demonstration of having a win for these quote unquote parallel societies, right? So let me just give you an example, just with Logos, for instance, us going into and when I say us, I mean us going into these communities and then trying to figure out who the local leaders are, who the local community is that's interested in creating a change, like, or having an impact in that community. Who are those folks? And then helping provide them with the people power, the resourcing, and the ability to create that change and have that impact is to me, and I think to us, a huge metric of success for developing these networks. Because right, you have to, it can't just be, oh, we're here and we're growing because we have more people involved. That's like biology's success metric, right? But that's not always necessarily or a de facto good thing, right? You can be a colonist, right? Or you can be a colonizer, and you can go into a place and you can say, I have all these people and I'm really big. But would we really relate that to success? You're just recreating some old model of control as a society as the past. But I think having a community that grows and has an impact. For instance, we were able to get those Raspberry Pis into that educational institute in Zanzibar in Africa, and that is a very actionable success metric that we can actually say, hey, people, we did this, this happened, and now what we need to do, we need to grow this. So it's just even like the small things of people knowing that they have agency to create change where their governments and where their local businesses and institutions have failed, right? I think this is massive. Now, there's different levels of quote unquote success and success metrics. I think that's one of the key ones that we can look at on in a very early stage. But over the long term, having a movement of with different networks and different cells, different quote unquote circles that develop all around the world that are creating this kind of impact, that are taking back ingenuity and human energy and human capital and deploying it to solve problems where governments have failed, is a massive win and a good representation of what it means to move the dial forward within the context of these communities. And I think that's a great metric. But of course, a metric for somebody like Mark and what those guys are up to with charter cities is probably going to be completely different than what I would view, because I think we approaching this from an activist standpoint, from the perspective of a local community, is the way that we have to view the development of these communities in over the long term for them to have success. Because this is, get this, Hugo, this is my big fear. My fear is that there's a lot of folks who are trying to set up these parallel societies or charter cities, and they're not oftentimes trying to integrate with the local communities. They're oftentimes, they have their own their own ideologies and their own goals and motivations, and those don't always easily sync up with those communities that are there. And this also not only creates frictions and tensions, but it could, over the long term, actually create a politically unstable environment that could escalate into violence. See, this is, I think, something that a lot of folks, and speaks to what you were talking about earlier, Hugo. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of ideology. There's a lot of, uh, there's an idea that the future is just going to be bright, nothing can go wrong, and it's a lot of crunchy granola, almost hippie-esque. Everything's going to be perfect over the long term, but people really can get hurt as a result of this if we don't if we're not careful in the way that we integrate our new communities into the local communities where we're going, right? Bad things could happen as a result of this. It's just not, we're not just moving fast and breaking things in the cloud. Like, it's not just zeros and ones that we're dealing with. It's human beings, flesh and blood on the ground, and you can cause massive negative ramifications as a result of actions on the ground. So we have to be very serious about that as we develop these. I would hate to see one of these communities implode almost violently as a result of what they're doing on the ground. And that is a very real thing that we have to talk about. I'm not going to name names, but I had tried to have this conversation. One of the first conversations I tried to have with the community is like, what are you concerned about security, about how you're interacting with the local communities? How do they feel about you? And I actually got censored for talking about this in one community. It's like, we want to stick our heads in the sand. We want to put our fingers in our ears. We don't want to hear about this topic because it doesn't feel good. We just want to have this 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 beautiful vision of the future, and the way that we see it, and that nothing's and the idea that nothing can get in our way or can stop us. But that, of course, that's not the reality of potential quote unquote political situations on the ground when you move into these spaces.
Definitely.
So a few thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
it's a major blind spot. I have to leave now at the 15 mark. I had a meeting already starting 15 minutes ago that I have to attend. But like the thought that I wanted to leave with, and maybe this will also like open up the audience to engage a bit, is in regard to what you mentioned and to the very interesting and I think apt name of parallel societies. Then we need to really think about the perpendicularity of the parallel societies, and eventually they even become perpendicular societies and not parallel societies. But eventually they can be both. So they can definitely be parallel societies that then have that intersection, and that's what matters. But yeah, it will be an interesting name for an art installation or an art workshop during the summit now in March, around how you can make something parallel also perpendicular. That will be that could be interesting. Or a dance move as well.
Yeah, definitely could be a dance move for sure. Now, Hugo, I want to respect your time. I know you got to go, so I just want to thank you again for coming and having this conversation. And I can't wait to meet you in person, and we can get together and we can hash out these ideas in parallel society here in just a few weeks.
Likewise.
So, and thanks for being involved with us, my friend. Really appreciate your work.
Likewise. Looking forward to that, and I hope to see a bunch of folks now in March in Lisbon. I'm sure it's going to be one of the top conferences of the year.
100%, brother. Have
Cheers,
a good day.
Have a good day.
Cool. So, my friends, we can stay here and I can chat with you for a bit. There's a lot of thoughts that I have on this conversation. We have Chair up here too. I do want to continue the conversation for a bit of time because this is a really important one. I'm really glad that those guys came on, but we definitely want to respect their time. So, but again, if any of you folks want to come up and have a conversation with us, you're more than welcome to. We'll just really turn this into a circle powwow for the next 15 minutes. So we have Chair up here. Welcome to the stage. Do you have any thoughts on this matter, my friend? We can have a conversation and we can continue to discuss it. I wanted to actively talk about this for a bit.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. As we were speaking, I started wondering if Balaji has popped up in the recent email leaks, and it turns out he has. One of the original founders of Coinbase. And anyway, I won't go down that road, but there's a lot that I agree with. There's also a ton that I disagree with, so I want to be careful at the moment. It's becoming increasingly obvious, and I'm starting to see, or it's becoming increasingly obvious to lay people, I'll say, maybe not necessarily lay people, but people with greater faith or less reasons to distrust the status quo or the current system. But it's too hard to ignore for even people that have been, I'm starting to see people in their retirement ages starting to question the bill of goods that they've been sold. And maybe this is a little more American centric, but that's a very positive sign for me, in that if people who have been raised entrenched in the fairy tale are starting to question the integrity of the systems that they're supporting or a part of, at the least, or benefit from, even, maybe, and that's a strong sign. I agree. Like, I think we touched on it a little bit, in that it's not going to be all honky dory. Hey, thumbs up if you know what honky dory means. That's what that was my initial Like, does everyone know what honky dory means? It means good. No, it's gonna be uncomfortable. I think it already is becoming uncomfortable for a lot of people, and in terms of this transition globally that's happening, system to system, society to society, government to government, as things are revealed and systems are collapsing, monetary systems are collapsing, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots has become a chasm, uh, a crevasse, even. We're trying to cross that chasm. Can be difficult, if not impossible. That, the dominating thought that I have, like, we have to be very careful about where we choose to align ourselves with, and as we can see, the emails are such a hot thing right now. I'll keep referring to them, but you never really know where people's true allegiances lie. Even if you have a pretty, I mean, our intuition is always our best compass, or it's my best compass. But as you join a network or a movement or a society or a community or a club or an organization or a bowling league, like, doing our own due diligence about what it is exactly that we're getting into is, I think it's important. And I have been very guilty. Maybe I still am. I mean, we probably all still are guilty of participating in a system that ultimately results in suffering or negativity or disease, of others. But perhaps our place in that system is not so bad for us and the ones immediately around us. And what are we being herded towards is also the man. I'm really keeping it vague, aren't I? Good. What are we being herded towards? By the legacy institutions and by these new institutions, and systems that are popping up as being highly examinatory. I don't know, critical of those things, and so I anticipate we're going to be in Lisbon, where there will be many different organizations and groups present, and represented, and each with their own mission and promise and objectives. And we're probably going to be inundated, like even as we are now, with social media timelines. It's going to be a lot to choose from. Ooh, that was my singing bowl. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. You know, I'm not keen to upload my consciousness anywhere, man. I don't know. That feels like a trap to me. And but that, maybe that's also neither here nor there. I am, like, if anyone has any strong thoughts on that part specifically, I'm interested in speaking on that a little bit. I don't want to just bloviate alone. But here, for a moment, let me just try this second. Is this coming through? Everyone take a deep breath.
Yes, it definitely came through.
Take a deep breath. Everyone calm down. We're going to get through it. We will rise. We shall ascend. Namaste. I don't know. I just ran around the bases to nowhere there, Sterling. How was that?
It's all good. Well, no, there actually is a conversation embedded in this that I think is interesting. You mentioned uploading your consciousness into a computer, not wanting to do that. So, what this concern is around, and this is actually relevant to a lot of these parallel society communities. Again, not purposely just to name him, but I think of Balaji because he's very much focused on getting as much high tech embedded into these communities as possible, as quickly as possible. There very much is an accelerationist mindset built into that. And so the concern that a lot of people in a lot of communities are talking about is the concern of transhumanism, right? And is transhumanism an innately bad thing, or a good thing, or something that is just inevitable? So for you guys who aren't familiar with the term, let me describe this real quick to you. And then, by the way, we have a hacker man here on the stage. I'm going to let you speak here just a minute. Let me make a comment, and then we'll welcome you to the stage, my friend. I just want to acknowledge that I recognize that you're up here. So, transhumanism is the idea that we should leverage technology to evolve beyond our current physical form, but it also could imply our mental form as well. So it is about improving or augmenting ourselves to be better than we currently are with our physical form. This could be in the form of like some type of prosthesis, right? And so in some ways, or actually in a lot of ways, we are very much are transhuman, right? Even having glasses that augment vision is a form of technological prosthesis, right? That is part of transhuman. But of course, the term is also very much politically charged, my friends. So when we say transhuman, a lot of people think of people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who want to, like, Elon and his project with Neuralink, wanting to have brain implants and chips, also wanting to maybe force people into engaging with certain types of transhumanist activities, and maybe forcefully have their body changed to go along with the trend line of society. So there's some differences here that would need to be unpacked and discussed. And the reason this is relevant to parallel societies is because there definitely is an accelerationist and a transhumanist mindset with a lot of the people involved at the higher end, right? Because you guys know that Peter Thiel and Balaji both have kind of a transhumanist mindset, and they have funded and they have seeded a lot of these different communities. I don't know if a lot of you knew that, but these guys are behind a lot of the financing in the space. So there is concern that there's going to be a move to pushing people to changing or altering or augmenting their bodies in ways that could actually undermine their freedom, their cognitive capacity, their ability to act of their own volition and to think for themselves. And this is a potential risk vector. And this speaks to what Chair articulated as being concerned about this, right? Because if you're uploading your consciousness to a computer, which is right, like the typical metaphor or analogy used, or description even used to describe transhumanism, what if you're uploading your consciousness into a system that is ultimately controlled by one of these engineers or these architects? Like, it's blockaded off and now you're just subservient to that system, right? That's terrifying. So but there's also just the meaning that transhumanism is just simply augmenting our body, right? There's also forms of transhumanism, by the way, that work in thoughts or philosophies of liberty, right? Max Moore, who is a well-known transhumanist, created a side movement called extropianism, right? Extropianism is an evolving framework for upgrading the human body, the human mind, for being able to move into an accelerating future. It's like a preparatory movement, but it also involves an evolving framework of how we can upgrade our political and our governance structures to maximize freedom. So there's different ways of looking at this, but I think also that we certainly need to be skeptical of anyone saying that we have to upgrade our bodies, or that we must do it, upgrade our bodies and minds to fit in with where society is going. I think we have to optimize for exit and choice. Exit should also be involved in transhumanism, right? You should be able to exit out of communities that are trying to force you to upgrade or to give out your DNA for whatever technological reason. So I think transhumanism is fine if contextualized around the idea of choice, voluntarism, being able to exit communities that are doing things that you don't like. So I really think it comes down to being as simple as that, but it also, of course, is not as simple as that, depending on how our future particularly irons itself out. Anyway, I wanted to give some context around Chair's comment there, because I think it's very relevant to these communities. In the meantime, again, like Chair said, I don't want to continue just to bloviate here. I want to spend a few minutes to give Hackerman, who decided to come up and chat with us, and we appreciate that very much. to offer any kind of thoughts or considerations on the topic that you have. Well,
Also, all this speak of transhumanism reminds me of Pantheon. I don't know if all of you have watched the series, but without going into too many spoilers, it's basically where someone's figured out a way to upload people's brains into computers, and uh, it there's a lot of ethically and morally not great things that happen there, without going into too many spoilers. But anyway, uh, regarding the earlier part of this conversation, I where we were speaking about activism and that kind of thing, I was wondering where uh, we could fit this thing of maybe having manufacturing or some other kind of value producing um, industry or something else be born out of logos. Because in my opinion, we could use that as a way of bringing value, adding genuine value even within the existing system. This is only going to make it more likely for people to want to join, because there's actual value people would be able to get out of it as well, especially in a country like India, where there's a lot of young people, but there isn't as much investment into certain industries like manufacturing. For instance, there's a lot of research that talks about how the entire country basically skipped the manufacturing sector and just went directly to becoming a service oriented sort of economy without having a lot of local value production. So, what happens is in India, a lot of people make their wealth by either just selling software services or financial services to uh, the US. And I think if we're able to tap into that effectively somehow, of course, that requires a lot of figuring out where demand is, what kind of thing is actually useful, and a lot of entrepreneurship related things. But I'm wondering if there's some kind of work or a lot of thought put into that direction so far. Let me just pass away the mic as I see the chair has something to say.
Yeah, I think that to my interpretation, which is my own interpretation, but I think it's aligned with what you're thinking about or hoping for, and it's what I hope for as well. And I wonder where we are on the timeline of it. Well, I know where we are. We're in the DevNet portion of that timeline, but I think that is the idea or my interpretation of the Logos movement, the network, the blockchain, and all of the services and protocols that are encapsulated within it should be the foundation for all sorts of different types of industry services, and like in a peer-to-peer way that aligns or sort of completes or brings closer to completion. I don't know, and it's been bastardized already. Like the original vision of Bitcoin and the continuation of that vision with Ethereum, like adding execution and compute to the equation, but still with elements that are less desirable for the goals and objectives of what we've been talking about. But I think that's exactly to cut it short. I think that's exactly the point of Logos, and furthermore, that those industries and services, let's call them, can be done in a more honest way, and most importantly, in a peer-to-peer way, which does not happen currently. And like I jokingly say it, but I believe it. I think it's true, in that like Logos is the marriage of, or the second or third generation of the combination of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Linux, and Tor. When you put all of those together, now you have you have a much more resilient, or potentially more resilient, system on which you can build a manufacturing system, peer-to-peer service system, and one that is, it's been brought up to me recently. Thinking like people with big money, like the billionaires, of which I hope that there is at least one good one, haven't found them yet. Maybe they keep themselves real. Actually, no. They probably are around, but I think most of them keep themselves pretty obscured for safety reasons. Um, it's hard for them to make a real impact on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, in that they can deploy capital, sure, and they can obfuscate it to a degree, sure. But if there's a benevolent billionaire who wants to throw a billy towards a cause that they believe in, it's not the easiest thing in the world, because the opposition that they would get from the upper end, it's and that's probably more what their concern would be, is like, if they're gonna move this capital via the banks, or via whatever legacy system towards this cause, like, it's gonna be right there. It's gonna be very easy for those in opposition, let's say, to see it. With a system like Logos, it becomes a lot more accessible to those with like vast amounts of liquidity, but like can't necessarily deploy it via Bitcoin or Ether, or even like maybe they can with Monero, but that's kind of a different paradigm. But they can with Logos. So it's like, where do you get the funding for these things? Like, it might come from the same sort of pool where of funding, and like where currently it's a little bit dark and weird, or worse. But and where the more benevolent, or sort of handcuffed and not able to distribute, I think Logos provides that opportunity. So long story short, like, yeah, I think that's exactly the point of Logos. It's what I hope to see, like, really quickly, once testnet goes out, and certainly when mainnet is live, is that people are building real services on top of it. That is my hope.
Nice, thank you, Chair. I'll respond, and then we'll start closing down the space. I really enjoyed this conversation, my friends. Hackerman, great thought and question with regard to Logos and like value generation within particular communities. You can tell me if I get this wrong in terms of like answering your question, but I think Chair did nail it, in the sense that the thing about Logos and the Logos technology stack is that it's highly adaptable to whatever type of community that you have, and the value that it can produce within the context of those communities is really infinite and extremely flexible. And this is also why Logos has largely been impartial to different kinds of communities and the ways that they leverage the technology, because different communities have different values, and and we talked a lot about experimentation earlier. Different communities have different types of needs. So being able to deploy the Logos technology stack to meet your individual needs, to meet whatever kind of governance applications are needed for those communities, is really critical. And it's also through this process that we actively grow the different kinds of parallel societies, the different types of networks. It's also that we create kind of a new species of economic engagement within the context of those communities. And we all do this while preserving people's privacy, their anonymity, by having these cypherpunk and crypto anarchist values kind of developed into the core of the Logos network. So it's cool. We can be like impartial to the communities, but we also have the value of the cypherpunk movement also embedded in the Logos technology stack. So that in that way we can kind of have our cake and eat it too. But I think whatever type of like value network, or whatever type of governance creation or application that you need in your community, Logos can actually be there to facilitate that, right? So I think that's a beautiful thing. The flexibility of the technology to the needs of the different kind of communities is where the rubber meets the road here with regard to the tech. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I think we had a really amazing conversation. We went over a little bit there, but I think it was worth it. I think there was a tremendous amount of value here. I want to thank, first of all, Hackerman for coming up and adding to the conversation. It's not always that we get people coming up, but that that is perfectly acceptable. No one, of course, is obligated to chat, but when people do come up and chat, we very much do appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for being part of the community. Chair, thanks for adding to the conversation and continuing the conversation with me here at the end. Definitely thank Mark and Hugo for coming and giving the time that they could to discuss parallel societies and the development of this ecosystem and how digital nomadism has played into it. All you guys who are OGs who came into the space and have been here the whole time, we definitely appreciate your support. I know that I do personally. Uzair, Tiger, Matthew, D. Clinch, Godfrey. We also have Odd Name, Lalo, Elemental, and Freedom in here. Thank you guys so much for coming. We're going to continue to do these spaces. Look forward again to next Tuesday for the digital logo circle, and then again next Thursday for our guest. We're still working on the guest for next Thursday. Not sure who it's going to be yet, but also bear in mind that we are moving very close to parallel society. So we are about to all be in the air and traveling to Portugal if we have to fly. And we'll be getting together there. Any of you guys who want to come and join us at Parallel Society, we definitely recommend picking up a ticket, ps.logos.co. Would love to see you there. Love to see how we can help you with Logos Tech, with Circles, any way that we can, and vice versa. So again, thanks, friends. Let's keep moving forward. Let's keep the momentum up. Also, let's make sure that we have our optimism balanced very equally with our ideologies and the direction that we're going. I think that's really important. This idea of humility has to be built into what we're doing, and I think Hugo and Mark, we all kind of got into that earlier. Very important for outlining the future and being able to grasp those attractors that I always talk about and build a better future of collective betterment and human flourishing. So thank you so much, my friends. Until next time, this is Sterling